Mary was a senior radioactive waste policy specialist with the Nuclear Information and Resource Service. She's now retired, but I'm very happy that she's with us. Mary will talk about why atomic radiation is more harmful to girls and women than to boys and men. And understanding that the health impact of nuclear weapons explosions on girls and women would be even more severe than the one. That was one of the very important aspects that came to the fore in the Humanitarian initiative a few years ago. And also of the inadequacy of the standard male models that are used so broadly. So I'm very happy that Mary is here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak. And thank you, all of you world family here today. Thank you for listening. I want to mention that my slides have citations in the note pages, and that's published on my website, which is genderandradiation.org. July 16, 1945, the first nuclear detonation was conducted in south central New Mexico and was codenamed Trinity. There were roughly 15,000 children, women, and men living within 50 miles of the test site, and so began the atomic age. The goal of fission, making atoms split each other, is to release massive energy. My focus today is on the prompt gamma and neutron pulse from fission. It is 5% of the total energy release, while persistent radioactivity is about 10%. That is fallout. This photo was taken from the plane that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. It is a mistake to say the photo is of the bomb. This cloud is what was moments before buildings, trees, homes, girls, boys, women, and men. And this was the city of Nagasaki. These are inherently indiscriminate weapons of mass destruction. More than 2,000 nuclear explosions have already occurred. Our planet is deeply contaminated without even waging a full-scale nuclear war. And I need to take a moment to acknowledge a personal side. My government chose to use the first nuclear weapons on cities full of people. More than 200,000 people perished in the blast or soon after. 5 years later, the U.S. initiated a long-term study of the 1945 atomic bomb survivors. Researchers assumed that humanitarian aid from them might skew the results of the study. They did not provide medical treatment to the victims they studied. Data resulting from the atomic attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki is used widely, including by me here today. Speaking as only one woman, I need to say I'm sorry. I wish this history had never happened. But I continue to use these numbers because what they say is vital to our survival. Radiation impacts our cells. When reproductive cells are harmed, deformations are one outcome. This happens to all babies, plants, animals, humans. We also suffer loss of fertility, spontaneous abortion and miscarriage, possible heritable mutations, and avoidance of reproduction due to uncertainty. Radiation is invisible, but we can see the damage it has done to these chromosomes. A clear spike in deaths of infants followed the 1945 Trinity nuclear detonation. This finding in New Mexico was only recently reported by Tucker and Alvarez in 2019. Consequences of nuclear tests are tragic and often irreparable. Nuclear colonialism is responsible for disproportionate impact to indigenous peoples from nuclear weapons testing. New digital simulation of the French nuclear tests at the island of Aurora by Sébastien Philippe and his team at Princeton reveals far greater impacts and to a wider area than previously acknowledged. Cancer is the most studied long-term consequence of non-lethal radiation exposure. When genetic material in a living cell is damaged, sometimes our bodies can repair that damage. Otherwise, the abnormal cells sit quietly in our body for years or even decades before it makes us sick. There is no way to predict which exposure will result in cancer. In general, more radiation equals more cancer risk. However, even an exposure too small to measure could sometimes result in cancer death. This report, The Biological Effects of Ionizing Radiation number 7, also called Beer 7, is a source of the data for the findings I'm about to present. It is all first-generation atomic bomb survivors, and I agree we need to understand better about the subsequent generations. Children's bodies are small, so the same amount of radiation delivers a larger dose. Since children are growing, the cells in their bodies are dividing more rapidly. The DNA in cells is more likely to be damaged in cell division. The A-bomb survivors were grouped by the age they were at the time of the bombing. These groups were tracked over their lifetimes. Cancer and cancer deaths were counted. This focus is on the outcome of the prompt radiation exposure from the bombs. There are problems with the data, but we can broadly say that those who were 5 years or younger when exposed had the most cancer at some point in their lives. And here is news, really major news. Girls in this youngest age group were twice as likely to get cancer at some point in the next 60 years than were boys. For every male in the birth to 5-year cohort that suffered cancer, 2 females got cancer. This is not all childhood cancer, it is total incidence. The Beer 7 report is where these numbers are found. The report itself does not discuss these details. I first published my findings in 2011. They are independent confirmation of work published by Dr. Arjun Makajani and his team in 2006. It's extremely important to understand, unlike the US EPA, that little girls are not a subpopulation. We are an inextricable link in the human life cycle. And if we don't understand our life cycle, we are doomed. Biological sex was also a factor for those who were adults at the time of the bombings. Over their lifetime, women exposed as adults suffered 50% more cancer death than did men in the same age group. For every 2 men in these cohorts who died of cancer, 3 women died of cancer. This is the same information on a chart. However, it's also a scenario based on the primary data. The bottom shows the ages of the survivors in 1945. Those who are infants are grouped at the left. On the right are the elders. Each age cohort was tracked across their lives for 60 years. Cancers were reported for each group. Each bar shows the rate of cancer per 100,000, as if everybody got the same radiation exposure adjusted to 1 gray. Like I said, this is a scenario. To more clearly see the impact of age and biological sex on outcome. And it is easy to see that females suffered more cancer than males in every age group, and the difference is greatest when the exposure is in childhood. So, our chair mentioned the word why. The actual answer to the question, why is biological sex a factor in harm from exposure to ionizing radiation? Why? We don't know. One hypothesis from my mentor, the late Dr. Rosalie Bertel, is the greater amount of radiosensitive reproductive tissue in female bodies need to be tested by qualified institutions of excellence, like some of you in this room. The answers will impact all of us. So my 3 takeaway points. 1, ionizing radiation is harmful to living cells. Harm is greater when children are exposed compared to adults. Number 2, at any age, radiation is more harmful to females than to males. Young girls are most harmed by radiation, measured as cancer across their lifetime. There are other types of harm from radiation. Radiation protection does not reflect this finding today. Prior to the work reported here, it was presumed that radiation, like the weapons that produce it, was indiscriminate. Not so. These points, this is point number 3, provide strong evidence for the jurisdiction of humanitarian law over fission, most especially nuclear weapons. The future is in our hands. I want to thank this community for all the work you do and